Hello, everyone, and welcome to Adobe Live. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you are tuning in from. My name is Anna McNaught, and I will be your host today. And I am joined by the extremely talented photographer and Photoshop artist, Erik Almås. Welcome, Erik. How are you feeling today? Are you excited to be here?
Of course I am. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'm very excited to learn your process. Erik has some incredible work, just gorgeous photography and compositing where his light editing is flawless. You can't even tell that they're pieced together. So I'm very excited to learn from you and welcome everyone coming into the chat today. It's nice to have you all here. I won't waste any more time introing everyone because Erik, I know you have a wonderful intro of your work for us. So let's dive right in. I'd love to hear about you, where you're from, how'd you get started, and show us a few of your magical pieces.
Oh, thank you. So I'm from Norway, grew up in a small town called Trondheim. And then at about 21, I decided photography was my path. I applied for different schools in the US and ended up in San Francisco to study at the Academy of Art University. And then I got really intoxicated by the craft. Initially, I thought, oh, I'll just go to school for a few years, learn some tricks, be a sports photographer. And, 25 years later, I am still in California and make my living as a photographer.
Oh, awesome. I love that.
Thank you. It's been an extraordinary journey. So I'm happy to share some of it. I'll start with sharing some of my pictures so that you get a sense of who I am as a photographer. And then we're obviously going to do the Photoshop retouch, but I want to share a little bit about how to find your voice as a photographer. I think it's something that is maybe underestimated. People look at technique and cameras rather than thinking about why do we really take pictures. So I'll touch on that a little bit. It's one of my little passion tricks, if I could share that. And then we'll go into the retouch of one of my signature pieces. And through that process, we talked about flawless light matching and stuff. We'll talk about that to make sure that all the composite pieces falls into place.
That sounds great. Yeah, such an important topic to talk about your style and all of those things that kind of make us who we are as artists.
Right. So I don't know if you want me to speak to each one of these pictures, but I could just run through them kind of briefly. It's
Sure.
really just a little sample of some of my work, some recent, some a little older. This was done recently for a casino in Las Vegas. This is part of the campaign that we're going to use as a case study today. It was photographed for Crystal Cruise Lines. And we went to New Zealand, Barcelona, Venice, the US, Costa Rica, Hong Kong. We went all over Amsterdam to capture some of these. The thing about this campaign that relates to what we're going to do today is that we captured all of these background plates with just myself.
Wow.
And then we met at a rooftop studio in Los Angeles 2 months later, and we photographed the talent and all those parts and pieces in a studio. So backgrounds was done just with myself and a local fixer, and then we photographed the talent afterwards. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Oh, so cool.
This is kind of what the process looks like. Parts and pieces and CGIs, often idea driven. I'm going to talk quite a bit about matching light, and then also something else called surface matching, which is quite important when you do composites. So building the same surface in a studio setup to match the surface that it's going into. I think that's a really neat trick to make things look seamless in the end.
Ooh, I love this one.
This one?
Yeah, wow. Love to see the behind the scenes of that. All of your work is
Ah,
so captivating.
I actually have a small little snippet. I could pull it up afterwards, maybe.
That would be
But
great.
this car is photographed in a garage where the car was living, and the landscape was photographed by itself, and the pieces then put together. It was a love story narrative where the car crash symbolizes the crashing and ending of a relationship. So some of the
Wow.
thoughts behind it. Too fast, too slow, Anna? What do you think?
No, this is perfect. Yeah.
Um,
Everyone's loving your work. We're getting a lot of great comments. People are saying beautiful work. So exciting to see all of your light painting and the way you match you're matching your lighting. So it looks like it's going to be a really great stream, everyone. Thank you all for being here in the chat. And yeah, let's just keep on going. Looking good, Erik.
Thank you. I have one mishap here on my slide deck. I didn't get the time to change it.
Oh, I love this one so much. I saw this when I was looking at your portfolio and I immediately just gravitated towards it. It's like flawless.
Thank you. And I'll tell you about this too. We went to Florida to capture this, but we ended up having terrible water the day we were going to photograph it. Super windy, high choppy water. And what we ended up doing was to put the talent in the pool at the resort we were staying. And then I went out the next day when the water was calm and photographed the water and added the clouds. So again, this is following the same principles that we're going to talk about today when it comes to compositing.
Yeah. Wow. Were those both for a campaign that you did or just?
Yeah, so these were done for a wine brand called Je ne sais quoi, where they had the tagline was a French flair with a California twist, or a California flair with French twist, or something like that. So it was about French aesthetic and flavor with California wine.
Wow. Love these.
This can seem simple at first glance, but this utilizes all the techniques we're going to talk about. So landscape photographed by myself and a scout in Colorado. Then these small houses, it's the narrative, right, of the three little pigs. These small houses back here were small little set builds. So it had a set designer build this miniature set for us. This building was done CGI to find something that had the brick texture we needed. And then we went to Jersey, not far from you, I think.
Yeah.
Where there's this wolf sanctuary, and we photographed the wolf. And then all those pieces came together into what you see here.
Oh my gosh, I'm going to have to look that up. I didn't even know about that.
All right. It's fascinating. The things you learn when you get into photography production.
Yeah.
So this is done for a company that makes bedding. Seems like it's done in camera. Another situation where it was really windy and choppy, pretty much all put together afterwards with a new set of water, new clouds.
Wow.
All that stuff that goes into it.
Ah, so cool.
Thank you.
Love these. So are you lighting all of your talent?
Well, yes and no. It all depends, right? So I have to say, for what I do, I put these slides in here as in I showed you a lot of the stuff that's composite driven, but then I do a lot of other stuff too. So I just put these in here so you get sort of an overview of all the things that I capture as a commercial photographer. When it comes to the lighting of the talent, it so depends. I'm known for being a conceptual photographer that use a lot of composite work, but my philosophy is always the less, the better. So I start with, working with as few pieces as I can and as little light as I can. And then I add to that when it's needed.
Wow.
So you will see that when we go through our example today, where I set up one light to match the sun. As the sun rose and the sun came through, they took that light away. So it's really about finding the narrative of the picture and what would be best for the photograph in the end, and then we light and do the things we need to make that happen.
I really love that. I love that
was
you're
a long answer, but it's not one formula, right, every time.
Yeah, yeah, I love that you're working with the natural elements and then kind of deciding based on, like you said, the narrative and based on what the image is kind of lending itself towards. That's so interesting and really shows your talent right there, because I think a lot of people are very inclined to just either use natural light or artificial light and not let the image speak for itself. So I really enjoy that.
Thank you. Thank you again for the compliments.
Of
I
course.
think when you start out, right, you find something that really works for you and you stick to it. And I think what happened to me in my career, as I matured a bit and the craft and technique, so to speak, became second nature, you start looking at the emotional quality and what the narrative is and what you want to say with the pictures and all those layers that come on top of technique. So I think it's a natural thing when you start out as a photographer. You look at, okay, what's the Photoshop work? What's the lighting technique? What do people do to get there? And when you
Right.
get there yourself, you start thinking, well, that's not really it, right? That's not why the Avedons and the Annie Leibovitzes are so extraordinary. It's really because they get something out of their talent. They get something
Right.
out of their stories. So um, I could dive into that if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally up to you. I think if
Yeah,
you want to dive into that a little as you're working, or
yeah,
whatever
we'll
you.
talk through it. I put this
Okay.
one wordy deck in here, and it says before we dive in on the practical execution, let's see if we can define what and why. And I'll tell you where this comes from and how it served me through my career real quick, because I think it's so important. I remember early on, right? It was about the camera. And then I had the camera, it was maybe about, well, how do they light? And then when you figure that out, it was, oh, but still my pictures doesn't look the same. And what filter do they use now in this Instagram world? But it's never really about that. It's really about what resonates with you. So when you create, you got to figure what that out is first. And then all the other things will be so easy. When I was in school, a photographer, Jock McDonald, came in and he gave us this little technique where you rip out magazine pictures, which is obviously 15, 20 years ago. Uh, and you start looking at the pictures that immediately attracts you. And then you start writing down things about these pictures that you love. Is it the color? Is it the light? Is it the atmosphere? Is it the people? You know, what is it about these pictures? And as you write these keywords down, you will actually have a list of words that is your style. So I
Hmm.
think we look at pictures on Instagram and we can't figure out quite what we're drawn to, but we like a certain style, we like a certain photographer, but it doesn't serve us to copy them, right? What serves us is to use these pictures as inspiration and try to find out what about these things it is that speaks to us. And that's what the artist does, right? You find what speaks to you and you go and execute it or try to describe it in some way that then manifests itself in pictures.
Yeah,
The
that's such a good
Revenant.
tip.
It's like, holy moly, what a world they created, right? Of
Yeah.
emotion and light and color. It's just so extraordinary. Robert Richardson. So as you see in this, when I started doing this process, first it was a lot of older men, then it was a lot of fashion and beautiful people. And then now it's mostly cinematographers that I look at. And it's so inspiring for me at this stage of my career.
Yeah.
Robert Richardson, this is from the film Hugo. I mean, it's so beautiful. Um, this is some random ones that I found from one of my inspiration folders. And I still do this, by the way. And I looked back at inspiration folders from like 6, 7 years back. And it's fascinating when I did this yesterday to see how my, if not aesthetic, the core aesthetic is still there, but what I'm attracted to, you know, is changing. So this is
Yeah.
something you could do all the time. This is another director of photography called Paul Myers. So let me know if I'm going too fast here. We are going to get to the compositing part and retouching, but I want to
This is great.
fly through this. So I made this little thing called what to look for when defining your photographic style. And there's two buckets there. There's the visual things and then there's the emotional things. And you guys can screen grab this if you want to. But as you look, this is the simplest way to do it. So if you go on Instagram, I'm sure you hit the save button, right, for pictures that you like. You could go on that save window and you could see all the pictures that you saved. And if you scroll through there, you will see a common thread, I guarantee it. And through that, I could start, I think if I could spend 2 minutes with your pictures, Anna, if you gave me a bunch of pictures that you were inspired by, I could quickly say something about your personality and what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for me, when I look at these, there's very few of these pictures, right? That's close up. Very few of these where people look in the camera. They're very observant and not really confrontational. They have a pensive sense of struggle. All those things I get from looking at these, and that helps me deepen my craft, right?
Mm.
That helps me inform me about what pictures I should take rather than just going, oh, this person takes great pictures, I should do the same. No, I think, well, yes, you could do that to start, obviously, but when you get proficient at the craft, you have to dig a little deeper and figure out why. Why are you drawn to these things? And I think for a lot of people starting out, they tend to take less pictures and look more on the screen at what other people do. I think if you're really inspired, I think if you find those things that really turns you on visually, you'll be way more likely to go and take pictures and practice. It'll be so much more fun. So to
Yeah.
help you get there, I know I'm rambling, but this is fun
No,
for
this
me.
is great.
The visual tools on one side and the emotional tools on the other, and I don't have to read it all, but subject matter, obviously, the color, tonality, contrast, format, how you crop it. Is it close, wide, large landscape? Some people love to shoot beauty shots, right? Love that connection with people. I started out shooting really wide and the talent was always really small. Um, and I realized I did that because I wanted to be there myself. So it was never really about the person, it was
Mm.
about me being in it. And then as I, matured, I was way more curious about now what is other people's stories and how could I bring them into the picture and all that. Depth of field, some people shoot super shallow, some shoot very sharp, which I'm more attracted to. And then post-production and how that feels. Is it hyper-real? Is it honest? Does it have a sort of painterly feel? Is it super realistic? All those things. And then on the emotional side, who do we choose to photograph? I'll tell you this. It's early on in my career, I was so attracted to older men. Didn't know why, I just wanted to photograph old people.
Mm.
And then, I don't have to go into my personal history, but um, it really came from a longing in myself for having a father figure. So that's why when that got solved, I went on to other things. So it's really interesting,
Wow.
right? You can learn a lot about yourself and the things that you're drawn to just by doing this exercise. I'm sure it will reveal something quite profound. And I'll tell you
Yeah.
why in a minute. Um, the action, right? Is it fast? Is it slow? Is it standing? Is it sports? Um, the kind of posing, the dressing, the props. And what's interesting about props in this, because you think about prop as a thing they hold or that they're next to like a car, but think about it a little deeper as in, is it feminine? Is it masculine? Is it new? Is it old? What does it symbolize? It's really interesting how you choose to prop something. And we all do this innately, right? We just go in there and we're attracted to it and say, oh, let's hold this thing. If we could be aware of why we choose these things, we could get to a fluid self-expression so much faster.
Mm.
And that is really why I'm sharing this. I think instead of buying a Photoshop filter or an Instagram filter or a package or whatever that is, just do this exercise for 10 minutes and you will know what you like and what you're drawn to. And then you can execute it yourself.
I love that. That is so cool and so inspiring.
Um, this is just to help you do this quicker, where you could put some words in there. Is it the light, color, feel, mood, space, person, and emotion? Which brings me to this picture. Um, I call this the game changer for me in my career because it was the very first picture I took that really spoke to me. As in, I photographed it, didn't think too much about it. It was film at the time. I scanned it and started fussing with it. I added the sky, I added a color treatment. And afterwards, I just thought, wow, this is the best picture I've ever taken. And this is what I want to do as a photographer. It so spoke to me. So all the stuff I talked about till now leads up to this. If you can get to this kind of feeling quicker, you'll excel as a photographer a lot faster. And all these techniques that I'm going to show they'll just fall into place, taking you to where you want to be as a photographer or artist.
Hmm.
So I literally then, after taking this one picture, I thought, this is me. This is my style. This is what I want to do. And everything else I've done afterwards has in some ways derived from this. Then I started looking at, why am I attracted to these things, right? Did this exercise. And look at this. This is Norwegian paintings. This is the landscape I grew up in. This is the art I ended up going to museums, seeing when I was a kid. And it's a clear connection there. And I never set out as a 22, 23-year-old guy to create these paintings. I just did it because it spoke to me. And now I realize why, right? It took me 10 years to figure that out. I think if you do this exercise, you could get to the why. I mean, we are all we've been shaped through our upbringing, right? And there's good things and not so great things, and all that can be explored through our photography. I took this picture, no idea initially why I would love to put this lady on a polar bear. And this is one of the more famous Norwegian myths.
Wow.
About this king that was a polar bear.
That's so interesting.
Isn't it? Another Norwegian painter. I did these pictures before I knew about these paintings.
Wow.
This came to me 10 years later.
Yeah, it's like almost subconsciously in your head.
Exactly. And if we can make this conscious, we can excel so much faster. So now that I get into teaching Photoshop, showing you how to do pictures like these, I want you to have this little spiel lingering with you, because that's the meat sauce, you know. The technique is really not all that important in the end.
Yeah.
It's just a means to an end.
Love it.
So
So cool.
That's my soapbox, Nana.
Yeah, hey, that was awesome. I think the chat really enjoyed that. Everyone's very intrigued by this. I know for me, it's something I've been thinking a lot about lately, is finding your personal style. And I've read about those exercises as well as writing down like things that you like about certain images. And I think the hardest thing that I struggle with, that I'm sure people in the chat struggle with as well, is figuring out why you're drawn to these things. And I think the way you just tied this together of your upbringing and almost the subconscious feeling is so interesting and inspiring to know that maybe it's something that we might not exactly know yet, but we'll discover down the road as we start to do these exercises.
Exactly. You summed that up beautifully.
Thank you.
It took me almost a decade to get there, right? To really sort out why. And it's only really in retrospect, right, that you could look at your work and see why you created it. You never know it when you're in it. But I think this exercise will bring an awareness to why you do what you do.
Yeah.
And you could do this exercise for almost anything, by the way. I realized later in life that this doesn't apply to just photography. It applies to careers and relationships and all kinds of things.
Yeah.
So it's a really neat thing. And it doesn't take a lot of time. And I realized with Instagram, and I started saving pictures, I'm already doing it. Almost every day, I save some picture in my saved gallery. And look in there is sort of this vision board, or whatever you choose to call it, right? Of all the things I'm attracted to.
I love it.
So that said, this is my daughter, by the way.
Oh,
my
so
screensaver. I thought I would take it away because it can be a little distracting, but you know, she's my lucky charm.
Yeah, she's beautiful.
So let me pull up this Photoshop file first so that we know what we're going into and what I want to share with you today. I mentioned it briefly in the introduction when I ran through my work, but this is what we're going to break down. All the parts and pieces that went into it, the color grading that went into it, and how we got to maybe the light quality and the overall feel of it. I know I've been talking a lot. If there's any questions, Anna, I'm happy to answer. And through this process too, for everyone listening, please ask questions. I would love for this to be just as much a conversation about this as it is a presentation.
Absolutely. For everyone in the chat, feel free to ask away and I will feed them over to Erik so that he can answer all of your questions. And for anyone who's just joining us, Erik has been explaining his process and finding his artistic style. And now we're about to dive into Photoshop and show exactly how he creates the lighting and the mood in these images that we just saw in his slideshow.
All right. So a little backstory first. Commercial assignment, but also very personal in nature, as in the client coming to me for the style of work and photography that I do. So it was for Crystal Cruise Lines, and they wanted to cover all the regions that they were going to. So Asia was a big one, um, Alaska, northern North America, Europe, also up along the coast of Norway. We did initially some estimates for the whole crew to travel. It was a timeline that spanned 2.5 months of consistently traveling, spending 5 days in each location. The client looked at that and they said, well, we can't be away on a photo shoot for 2.5 months. That's, what's the other options? The option was for me to travel to all these places by myself. And I landed a fixer or a location scout would come meet me. They'd go and shoot background plates. So landscapes with the intention of putting a foreground person in it. And then we went back to Los Angeles and we photographed the talent. So what you see here is a composite of a background in Venice, Italy. We added a sky to create that painterly feel. The best views I felt was of these canals was from the middle of the canal, not on the sides. And I'll show you all the captures in a minute where I try to create this story from one of the docks that was already there, but it didn't quite look as good. So I thought, why don't we just photograph a dock separately, put it in the middle of the canal, put the person on it, and maybe have this sense of arrival or departing with the boat. So that's the background story for this. So I thought it would be interesting to show all the captures. So I'm not going to go into Lightroom or any of the processing. I just want to show you real quick what it can look like. And
so many photos.
oh, thousands of photos. And I can speak to that too a little bit. Part of what I want to show is that people can look at a final picture, right, and think, oh, that's so magical. Then you look at this stream of pictures that I'm going to show you. There's nothing magic about it, right? Looks like tourist pictures. Now, what's important to know in this is that I do have an end frame in mind. So I'm not just shooting this at random. The story is someone is coming or going to this place, private taxi service, they're being picked up. So we're looking for a dock and sort of this landscape that symbolizes Venice. So we're scouting by boat. So we essentially just drove around earlier part of the afternoon and just looked at, the different places that might be good. Through this, you can see the sun coming in and out. Is it interesting to go through this, Anna? Should I just browse through it so you guys get a sense of it? Or should
this is definitely
speak
interesting.
To the process?
Yeah, I think it's great to speak to the process, to be able to see kind of like how you photograph this and then how you ended up choosing the final image. Because I think as a photographer myself and probably many other people in the chat, we take so many images and then how do you decide on that final piece?
Yeah. The reason for me really wanting to share this is that it's not magic instantly, right? This doesn't look like anything. So it's a little embarrassing to share, but that's why I want to show it, so that you guys don't think that, oh, Erik Almås does this fantastic work and it looks so good, but this is my raw files. And I'm not sure if this looks anything better or more extraordinary than anyone else that's tuning in would capture or see. Now, one thing I want to share, and I do pictures, so I love wider landscapes, right? So I rarely capture one frame. I'd like to capture as wide a format as I can. And when I go on these commercial assignments, more and more often, they want a lot of real estate in the picture. So they want to use it for a banner this way, but they want to use it for a banner that way. So you want to make sure that you capture enough real estate or image to be able to accommodate all these different uses, right? So when you look through here, this picture lines up with this picture. It's a left and a right. So those two things,
Oh,
let me see if I
yeah.
could zoom in a little. So these two pictures, when I photograph it in my mind, they're one, meant to be stitched together. And when we get into the final select here, it's actually going to be 4 pictures, 3 or 4. So let me.
Now, do you ever go back and delete all of these, or do you keep everything for
I keep
future
everything.
projects?
Oh,
Really?
yeah, absolutely. Storage
That's
is.
really cool because I feel like I am constantly going through and deleting stuff. So to see that you have all of these is very interesting because you could probably continue to do more work with the pieces.
Oh, yeah, I could talk about that. My wife likes to delete pictures. The only place I delete pictures is on my phone if I need more memory. You don't
Wow.
have to spend time deleting stuff. Storage is so cheap.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, yeah, my first server rack that had 2 terabyte drives in it cost some $30,000, and today you get 16 terabyte drives for half that cost, right?
Right.
Files are getting bigger too, but it's a small, I think, price to pay to store all your work and to not,
Yeah.
you should spend the time taking pictures rather than deleting pictures.
Yeah, that's a very good point.
So sun is in and out. If you do the exercise we just talked about, you would have defined to yourself what light quality you like, right? And for me, that's often backlit and low light. So if I were to pick a light quality that really resonates for me, unless I'm photographing someone on the beach or swimming in the water, water always feels better with highlight. But in this case, I'm looking or waiting for the sun going low on the horizon. And if it's backlit, that would be my preference. So as we drive, the sun is in and out. I don't know if you could see, but here it's overcast. 2 minutes earlier, it's sunny. So it looks kind of dreary. I'm halfway scouting and I'm halfway shooting.
Yeah.
I talked about, maybe finding a place where we could do this more in camera with a dock that was already in place. So we looked at this dock or entry point. Let me see. I'll zoom out a little bit so we don't get seasick looking at these pictures as I scroll. So this was the first time in the couple of hours we went shooting that I found this location. And this is where I ended up shooting. I shot several places, but the color palette here felt a lot better than a lot of the other buildings. Let me see. Again, it doesn't look like much, does it?
It's so cool to see how it can come to life.
So here we are. This, maybe I should, oh, too early. Let me pick here. Sorry.
Jeff says, I've always loved your work, Erik. So inspiring.
Thank you, Jeff.
Lots of fans for you here, Erik, in the chat.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. I'm so glad to share, really.
Yeah.
And I haven't done this in a while, so this is fun for me. I did some tutorials and I love teaching, and I did lectures and went to the academy and spoke for years and years and years. And then family happened. I got kids now. It's a little different. So let me just go through these. So in this picture, you see it's pretty hazy, but the sun is catching the horizon, and this is where I ended up. I think these are the frames I ended up picking right here. So
wow, yeah.
When I see something that feels good, the process is to then shoot so I'm standing right here thinking, okay, this feels great. Now, what if we need more real estate upwards, which means I shoot this frame, right? You could always add more sky, but we can't add more building. If that's needed, I'd love to have that frame. And back down, and then that's my left side. And these, then 3 pictures and a cloud to enhance the atmosphere and fill that square out is what we're going to work with to build this picture.
That's so smart to take multiple shots, looking up, down, sideways, left, right. It's really good because I feel like there's been many times where I'll get back and look at the pictures I took for a composite and be like, oh my God, I missed the top of the building.
It happens, right?
Yeah.
If it happens once, you don't do that again. You make sure to capture everything. A lot of my process too, when I shoot this, is to shoot front focus and back focus. So when we take pictures for a composite, you got to make sure that the place where the talent is going to be sharp. So if I shot with a really shallow depth of field here and I focused in the center of the buildings, it will fall out of focus. And you can kind of see that here actually, that it is falling out of focus in the front. Then it would be odd, right, to have a soft ground where the talent would be standing meshed in with a sharp talent. It's going to look off to the eye right away. So when you shoot with the intention of doing a composite, just think about where the talent would be and put your focus there. I'd like to have a really good depth of field for my composite work because that mitigates some of those issues, right? Gives you a lot more latitude when it comes to placing the talent in the frame.
Definitely. And I'm sure you'll get into this later, but do you then create your depth of field in Photoshop? Or if you shoot something that's fully in focus with a wide depth of field, then are you keeping it that way?
So I do soften sometimes as it gets back into frame. So here's the thing, right? You can't really sharpen. Well, you can sharpen a tiny bit if it's slightly out of focus, but you can't sharpen something that's way out of depth of field.
Right.
So it's always better to shoot things sharp, and then you can soften things in Photoshop. So
very good tip.
Unless if you did that exercise we just talked about, realize that I only like things that has a very shallow depth of field, it's always better to shoot things sharp and then, blur it a bit afterwards. That said, Photoshop never quite blurs the way a lens would, with the same vignettes, with the same aberrations. So if you like that look, just make sure you find your focus, or maybe do some plates that's sharp in the foreground, and then you shoot it with the depth of field you love. And then you can craft the pictures from there.
Such a good tip.
All right, so this is kind of it. Sun is going down and I feel like I had this. You see, I went closer, and this is a lot for these, these really signature pillars that they use to tie boats to. I'll talk more about that when we get into the retouch of it. But these were shot intentionally as a frame like that, so that I would have it for later on. All right, so let's just scroll through it. So
and are you shooting these? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Are you shooting these on a tripod or handheld?
So I often shoot my things on tripod, especially for composites. Being on a boat, it's hard to, doesn't make sense to have it on a tripod. So then I make sure that I have, a higher ISO, and I capture these in a way that gives me sharp pictures with the depth of field, or the most depth of field that I could or can. So in this case, no. A lot of times, yes. And we could speak to that too when we get into the composite parts, because there is, almost a formula, right?
Right.
And so I could dive into it now for a quick second, but for me, there's always something that I call the unmovable part. There's one piece of every photograph or every composite that set the light quality, that set the perspective, set the lens and the camera height. And if you are to do things technically correct, all other elements will then follow the same light, the same height, the same lens, and the same depth of field as that initial unmovable part. So for me, this is that unmovable frame. So it doesn't quite matter how I shoot this one. What matters is that everything I shoot after matches how this was done. So I could be a little bit more carefree on how I shoot my background plates. Hard on the boat, but whenever I do these composites, right, for commercial assignments, and it's been a lot of this during COVID, because the process have changed very much to a sort of safe set environment, where I would then shoot backgrounds and we would shoot people and put them in. I would then always measure my camera height, distance to talent. And when I come into the studio, I just go through my measurements and there it is. We shoot it with this kind of lens, that camera height, this camera distance from camera to talent. And then we set the light to match and then all things should fall into place. So for me, when I shoot this, right, I'm looking at, okay, I'm standing in a boat, which is 4 feet off the water, and then I'm standing myself, so I'm maybe 7 feet off the water or something like that, right? If I look at this frame now, just speaking about it, I could sense that I'm lower because this is the bow of the boat. So when you've done this for a while, it would get easier and you can kind of wing it. But it so helps to have all these measurements down.
Yeah.
So let me see. So I could speak more to that as I get to it. So then I felt, okay, the light's down, I got this, and we started capturing some other places. So for me, there's a few light qualities I love. There's the one with the sun that's just setting and things are a little backlit, but also in this territory here. After the sun goes down, you get this pink purplish glow, which I'm a big fan of. I would maybe brighten this, but this tonality you get as the sun is under the horizon, it hits the sky or the clouds and it bounces back and it gives this really soft but then still directional light quality. So this was a backup for me, this light quality you see here.
Yeah, love that.
And this again, we came back to this spot to possibly use this as a main element for the picture.
Oh, cool.
Look at this one.
Big fan of sunset skies.
In camera, these pictures here might be some of the, did I move this? Yeah, might be some of the closest, right, to what a final picture would probably look like with a decent sky, decent color palette. It's just to brighten it up a little bit. But that's the in-camera approach, which we're not going to worry too much about today. So whenever I shoot, right, we shoot till we can't shoot anymore, so it goes to dark, and then we go home. These are some more frames included in the folder, other options. I talked about the entry. These are pieces and parts that I just shot just for that foreground element if we needed it or wanted it. As I said, we ended up building our own bridge. Then the next day, we're shooting the boat and parts and pieces for the dock, possibly. And we're fogged in. Not the same light at all, right?
Yeah.
What's interesting in this is that you would think maybe, oh, the fog light doesn't match what we had the prior day, but the light that we had at the water level was sort of shaded light because the sun didn't hit it. So it actually ended up working out okay. And we'll see how we take these pictures and match them when we get into Photoshop.
Okay. I just want to go back real quick to a question we had early on from Paul Tranny, who's one of the Adobe evangelists and is hopefully still here. Paul said, which is harder, the concept or the execution? He said, I feel like some people just throw a lot at a composition and it doesn't have a clear point of view and doesn't seem to mean anything. So that's kind of going back to our earlier conversation, but maybe you can touch on that since I missed that earlier in the chat.
Wow. So the initial question was, what is harder?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person and where you are in your career, right? If you're starting out and you're young and excited, maybe the ideas just flow, but you don't have the skill set to make them happen, right? uh, at my stage, being what I think is fairly proficient in my craft, for me, it's just the ideas, so I
Yeah.
got the skill set to make it happen. So I don't think it's one or the other. It's really just combining the two and making the two happen, as in strong ideas. And we could talk a little bit about inspiration and where that could come from. Um, if it's interesting, maybe do that at the end if we have some more time.
Yeah, I
Um,
think that would be great at the end to talk about inspiration. I think people are always interested in hearing about that.
yeah, me too. Yeah, because people think, oh, how do you get inspired? And it's not being inspired in one place or one thing, right? It hits you in the
Exactly.
strangest places. So you just got to be open to it. And when it does happen, think, okay, how can I apply that to my craft? And how can I apply that to the list or the things that we hopefully have gathered through that first exercise?
I totally agree.
Um,
And one more question just came in while we're on that topic. Weston asked, how much input are you allowed to give when working with an ad agency? Are you just executing their concept?
both, both.
Okay.
So there's some that's a lot looser. This was a looser campaign. So there was 2 or 3 sets of layouts, but we were creating 12 pictures. So within the storyline and narrative of the first layouts, we created all 12.
Hmm.
Then there's other assignments, which is, so this is what happens when a huge company, right, is going to go to market with the product. They go to an advertising agency that will help them either to build a brand or build a narrative around this new launch. And then they go through plenty of focus groups, and then they go through tons of layers of approvals. I talk to people in advertising agencies who's been working on product development or campaign and branding developments for a year. So by the time all that work has been done and all those little differences have within their concepting have been approved, I can't as a photographer take that on and say, well, I want to shoot something different because I think that's better. It's like,
Right.
no, this clever mind who's launching a brand who's been thinking about this for a year. And at that stage, I feel honored actually that they would choose me to help them execute their ideas with my photographic style. So to answer the question, sometimes it's completely free, where they say, we love your aesthetic. These are the elements. We trust you to shoot it. Then there's other times where they say, well, this has been through so many focus groups. When it comes to, let's say, the pharmaceutical industry, it's all even been through FDA approval, right? So there's a governing body that says, okay, this concept is approved for this drug.
Hmm.
Uh, then I realized that, hey, I'm a commercial photographer. I'm a vehicle in your hands. Let's shoot this concept, this idea with the aesthetic that they hire me to execute it in, which if you look at my website, you would see there's a sense of style there, right? The light quality that I love, the landscape, the way I see things, the way I put together things conceptually. So again, it's not one or the other. I think they it's interesting, right? The better you become as a photographer, the less freedom you have.
Right.
With these big assignments, there's a lot of pressure. I mean, I did a healthcare assignment for Pfizer, and the art director said to me on the initial phone call, he says, this is the biggest advertising spend Pfizer ever had. Don't fuck it up. And at the time I laughed too, but when a few hours after that call, you just think, holy shit, it's a lot of pressure. And I take that on, right?
Yeah.
So with that, um, I feel it's actually in some ways liberating to have the parameters in the box that the agency gives you, because then you know where you can infuse yourself. You don't
Right.
have to think about, oh, I can go do something crazy over there. You say, no, this is our idea. This is what we want to say. This is what we want the viewers to get from the picture. And within that, I infuse myself.
I
Is
love
that a
that.
long answer?
That's a great answer.
So it's both. I think I had a lot more liberty when I was a younger photographer and just starting
Yeah.
out, because they didn't pay me as much and they were sort of okay. They didn't know so much about it. Not so much research was put behind it. And then as you get better, you get more confined. But um, it's
Yeah.
just a privilege. I've just been so lucky to work with some great people and great campaigns. So I don't I don't see it as that's a drawback at all. And what's
Right.
great, I'll tell you this about working on these larger campaigns. Us photographers get stuck by ourselves and stuck in our head a lot. As in, what am I going to create? Where should I get inspired? And suddenly you get to talk to an advertising agency with all these creative people. And you
Absolutely.
get all this input and feedback. And most of the time, right at the level I'm creating at, there's really smart people and creative people that throws great things to you. So I'll take that and run with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, I realized early on that being a commercial photographer is sort of a blessing, and I never had the inclination to say, "Oh, I'm an artist and I'm going to do this my way." I'm just, oh my God, I'm so honored to be a part of this, and what can we create together? It's my
Yeah.
attitude.
Yeah. Such a good point.
That was a long answer.
Hey,
So
that's okay. I think it's very interesting. And while you were talking, we had another question, and then we should definitely get into a little compositing here to see. I know you still have some images to talk through, and with the talent. But Daniel asked, "What is the process in mood boarding and scouting locations, especially when it requires travel without having the budget for a location scout?"
oh, so good question. And I had this
Yeah.
conversation with my producer 2 days ago. So I'm doing an album cover, because there's not a lot of albums anymore, but um, so they wanted the sense of Americana, right? And I'm thinking, man, about an hour and a half outside of Sonoma and San Francisco, where I live, there's this stunning dusty area, right? It's super flat. I go on Google Earth and I put the camera guy, or the street view guy on, and I go driving for 20 minutes. It is
Yeah.
extraordinary. So that's one option. And then there's the geotagging on Instagram and other sites, right? You can almost see anywhere in the world now
Yeah. So
without a
true.
scout. So, I mean, when I started out, when I was an assistant, I went scouting for my photographer, where I used a film camera, flew to these places, went to Walgreens for the 1 hour lab to get it developed overnight. And I would sit and put these photographs into folders, and I made two equal copies, one for the photographer and one that was shipped out FedEx to the client. And they would sit and look through these location pictures. So we come a long, long way. Um, so that's where I would start. And then if you're
Yeah.
really passionate about the project, get in the car and scout it yourself. I mean, that's
Yeah.
what I still do for personal work. So, you know, you I think if you're passionate about it, and we can talk about this process, right, which is so great for making pictures happen, high production quality pictures for less money, because you could travel somewhere, shoot a picture on your own, apply this process I'm going to take you through, shoot a person, and then suddenly you have something that looks quite magical for very little production money. So that would
Right.
be my advice.
Yeah, great tip. And I think looking on Google Maps and Google Earth is such a good idea. And going for a drive on there is a great tip. I mean, that's how we find so many of our locations. And just having been in Iceland, we were looking for certain spots to shoot that were off the beaten path a little bit, and just like zooming into Google Maps and looking at it in the satellite view and being like, oh, that looks interesting, cool contrast of colors, and let's go check it out. And it's so much fun to do things that way.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah, it really
Uh,
is.
anyway, so I'm not going to bore you too much with my Lightroom pictures, but I did want to show you. We ended up talking with these pictures in the background. I wanted to show you how the process is and what the raw files look like. So I'm going to scroll to the bottom here, and I'm going to show you what we did. Essentially, let me see. Why am I? Let's zoom out there. We went to a rooftop studio, which you see in the background here, and we built a small little dock, which is basically just planks that painted and patinaed a little bit. And we
Mm,
rented these two pillars from a prop house in Los Angeles. So here we have, the few $100s worth of plank, some styling, and we rented these for a few $100s. And with that, we're going to match the elements to create the composite you saw earlier. So maybe I'll show you a few more of these at the end here, where you have some of the behind the scenes, almost behind the scenes, to see what it looks like there. This is
So
my
cool to see.
awesome crew at the end. So let me just scroll.
So are you usually working with a big production crew like this, or do you do a lot yourself too, a mix of both?
It's a mix of both. Well, early on it was a mix of both. Now I got a lot of support because the budgets usually support it.
Right.
But you know, this afternoon I'm shooting my daughter and possibly my wife, right, for the composite we're going to do tomorrow from scratch.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Ah, that would be fun.
Right. I think that would be fun. So
Yeah.
the idea of it today is going through a picture that I've already done so you could see some of the signature pieces. And then I'll go through a fresh one tomorrow, and then you get my thinking through the process. So I think that could be kind of interesting. So yes, I do both. And honestly, this process here, right? So I'm going to take a background that I shot already, and then I'll photograph my daughter, I'll stick her in a basket, and I'm going to go hot air ballooning. And that is done with then 0 production cost.
Wow.
It is me shooting a background and photographing a talent that's available. That could be friend or family. So quickly, I want to show you this. So when I set this up, in the picture that we chose for the background, the sun was setting in the middle of the canal right here, right? Slightly to the right of where we want the talent. And when we get the pieces into Photoshop, I could speak more to this, but the essence of a composite is to match lighting and match perspective. So here, obviously, it's important for us to match the light and where the sun sits. Often when I do this, I try to go by first principle, which is match the source. So for me, you would think when you do composites, oh, let's go into the studio, set up a strobe. Strobes never quite look like sun, even though you see a strobe here, and I'll explain why in a second. When there's a low-lying sun, it's going to shape whatever it hits slightly different than the strobe that's standing 10 or 15 feet apart. It's just a different source. The luminosity of the sun and the sky and all these reflections around just acts a little bit different. So my process when I can, and this is why we chose the rooftop studio, was to use the sun as a match to source. If you see here, this is when we set up, this is sunrise. I know the sun will rise right here, and that's where we put the strobe. Strobe then is right in the center of the frame of the background, and it will match up perfectly for the talent that we're going to shoot. This platform that you see that he's walking on, that is on something we call steel deck, which is concert decking. So it has wheels on it. So I can rotate this platform. So if the sun rises and moves this way, I can rotate my platform so that I could follow the way the light shifts. Then I do this composite. Does this make sense?
Yes.
So to match the background, I've created a dock that matches in feeling with the same pillars as in Menace. And I'm matching the light, knowing the sun will rise right here. I would probably not use a strobe here at all, but look at the cloud cover. So I set up a strobe that will be my backup sun. So I could go through these real quick, but essentially this is, so whenever I do this, I also do it by eye, right? So we have some measurements, we know where the sun goes up and down, but I started shooting straight on with the dock, thinking that would be the way to go. And I thought, maybe it should come, I laid it into a comp that I had on set. And then I realized that, hey, maybe we should be a little bit off center. And later on, I will move myself a tiny bit to the left. Let me see. Or maybe I didn't. I thought I did.
I think I saw somewhere you were.
Yeah, maybe I'll do it later on. So let me just go through a few of these. Sun is starting to come out. So now you see the sun, or the strobe is sitting right where the sun is. So at this point, maybe there's both. This is Tom, an assistant of mine that I always use in Los Angeles, who's carrying a shiny board to give a little bit of a highlight into his hair. and back. And that's the only light we're using. So here you see the strobe is not firing. You see the sun behind is what casting the light onto the talent.
Oh yeah.
So let me see. Just go through this a little quicker.
Wow, so many shots. It's so cool to see.
I'm gonna tell you something. The guy I assisted for, he would shoot 4x5 film, and it's really quite expensive, right? To shoot 4x5, how to develop, do contact sheets, all those things that you did in the past, which we never really do anymore. He would shoot hundreds and hundreds of these sheets. Most of the time, people would shoot 15, 20 frames with a 4x5 camera. He would shoot hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Wow.
And now, obviously, with digital, we shoot thousands. But what he said always was, it's all in the numbers. And that has stuck with me through my career. As in, one good picture is not created through one snap, right? That moment, that instant is one out of thousands. With slower cameras, right? I would shoot one picture, then it will be another second for it to, if you use a face, for instance, it will be another second. Now with the new Canon cameras, which I absolutely love, I could shoot 12, 15 frames, right? And you capture a whole sequence. So if someone's laughing, you will make sure to capture that whole laugh, not the peak moment or the after or the before, but all of them. And it's so fascinating that I now could shoot almost like we're filming, and you will manage to capture that one moment. So yes, there's a lot of frames, and that's the reason why. It's not about one frame, it's capturing one moment within a time. And to do that, you just need a lot of pictures.
And I don't know if you mentioned this already, but what camera are you shooting on? Mostly? I'm sure you have multiple.
Yeah, so it's different cameras for different things. So I get that question quite a bit. But I shoot with a face for things that's more static, that's more contemplative, and also for background plates. And then I use a Canon for things that's moving fast, because the face, one is funky on the focus, one frame here and there. The R5 is tack on the focus, shoot a million frames, and I could just follow the talent.
Yeah.
So it's different tools for different things. That said, you don't need to have a phase, or you don't need to have an R5. You could create extraordinary pictures with the camera you have. And that's where we started, right? Initially, you think that, hey, I need to have the best camera to create good pictures, but that's so not true. You don't need to have, you need your phone, essentially.
Right. Well, they always say
it's about the narrative and the feeling and the things that you're attracted to, rather than the tools you have.
Absolutely.
Anyway, so be done with this. Yeah, I think I spent too much time with this, but I'm just gonna close out of Lightroom. Yes.
Yeah, we have about an hour left, so maybe hop into Photoshop and start creating that piece.
I can't believe it.
I know, it zooms by, right?
Zooms by. So you tell me, Anna, we could just talk through this thing. What I thought was, we could probably do it in an hour. I processed out my selects again. So let's see.
Yeah, someone actually just asked, I would like to know how he starts a composite. What does he take care of first? When does the light come in? And when does the color? So that could definitely be kind of a interesting way for you to show how this composite came together.
Okay, so I could build it pretty quick from scratch if you want, just to see how it comes together. And I won't spend that much time on the masking and all that stuff, right? I could quickly sort of put the pieces and some color. And then I could go into this file, which is the finished file, and we could go through the layers.
I think that would be great. That sounds like a good plan.
So then we're gonna put the pause on the finished file. just start with these pieces.
Yeah. And for any of you that are joining us over on YouTube, be sure to come over to behance.net/Adobe Live so you can join in on the conversation, especially if you have questions for Erik or want to know a little bit more about his process and how he's going about compositing these pieces. You can only ask those questions through the chat on Behance. So join us over there.
All right. So these were the, let's just close this window. So these were the pictures that we talked about, right? There's the right frame, there's the left frame, and there's the sky. So this is where it starts. And now I obviously done it before, so it's going to move a little faster, but this is just a process where okay, what does this feel like? And
Yeah.
how I retouch one day is not like how I would retouch the next day. It all depends on that day, how I feel about it, blah, blah, blah. So quickly before I dive in, and you, Anna, tell me if I move too fast.
Okay.
But essentially, I use only a very few adjustment layers when I create my pictures. I use curves, which, how in depth should I go? Should I assume people know their way around Photoshop? Should we take it from the bottom?
I think you can assume that most people know their way around, and you don't need to like explain where things are, what things do. Just kind of showing your process and how you would use curves for this particular image, I think will be enough. And then if people have questions, they can rewatch or ask anything in the chat.
Yeah. So essentially, these are my processed files. This is how it pretty much came out of camera. I could talk about clouds for a second. I 20 years or 25 years into taking pictures, I still collect clouds, and I have a sky folder or a cloud folder on my computer, and I draw from this all the time. Depending, obviously, again, match the source. Sun is right here, gonna match the sun right here. Important. So you saw how I did it. Just dragged it into Photoshop. The picture's open. Adjustment layers down here. So curves, you're gonna see me use this for almost everything. It's curves for contrast and it's curves for color. And I don't know, quickly, I feel pretty passionate about this because if you just pull a lever that says more contrast, less contrast, it will just compute where that contrast increase or decrease will happen, right? In curves, I could say that, well, I want no black points. I want it to be happening right down here in the shadow and no other contrast up here. So you have ultimate control through moving this graph up and down. And then you have the color channels, and we'll get into that in a minute. But between this RGB where I set my contrast and these color drop downs, I adjust all color. And if you're curious about how color work, you should go to Adobe. Is it Adobe Color? I think they changed that website a little bit, but I think it's adobe.color.com. And it's extraordinary. As in, you see all color palettes. You could drag these levers so you see what's contrasting versus symbiosis, color, hue, saturation. It's mind-boggling when it comes to finding your color palette and what you're attracted to. Anyway, so let's dive in. I would start with this piece because this I would consider the main one of the frame. Image, canvas size, just expand my canvas to fit the other pictures, right? So let's go 30 by 22, just random. Let me see. So if I move too fast, Anna, and if there's any of my shortcuts that's missing, that's not showing, let me know. But essentially, I usually have my select tool up here. And if I hold down the command key, that will shift to the move tool. So if you don't see me go up here to pick certain tools, it's just because I'm using my short keys.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
This anyone can figure out though. So I'll move pretty quick here, but I add a mask. For something like this, I often do this, right? You get distortions and the lens looking upwards, the building will be distorted. So we'll quickly tweak that to fit. Let me see. This is the straighter part. So let me just, maybe I'll pick up here.
While you're working, Erik, if you could answer a question from Ferry. He asks, you talked about hyper realistic and natural look earlier. What is the difference?
So if you guys go and look at Anna's work, Anna is a beautiful artist too. I would say that hers is more hyper realistic, super vivid colors, themes that doesn't quite maybe belong together or put together. And I would say that's more hyper real. And then on the other end is a photojournalist, right? And then I live somewhere in between. So I think you should just define to yourself what you're drawn to.
Yeah.
Are you drawn to something that feels really authentic to the way the eye sees it? Or are you drawn to something that is a dreamscape where things are flying, things are, you know, more of the imagination? So somewhere in between there, it's not a black or white, but if you define to yourself where, you know, your sensibilities are, I think you'll get to a place creating something that you're happy with pretty quick.
Great answer. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And sorry, Ferry, it wasn't ignoring you there. I know you asked that a few times and I didn't have a chance to ask it. So there you go. Hopefully that helps. Cool. Adding some clouds in.
So let me see. If you guys are curious, I'm hitting Command T for transform. That will pull up the bounding box. And then if you hit Control, you will get a drop-down menu. And I did perspective. And then to get out of the perspective, you hit Command T again for transform. And that allows you to do the changes I did. Too fast, too much, too little.
Perfect.
So there's an exposure difference here between the top and bottom. Maybe it was a time difference. So let me just line this up a little bit better. There, roughly. So I could address this maybe now, but I will fine tune. Usually I just put the pieces together and then I start matching things. But just quickly, again, it's drop down layers, curves, and I will make the bottom one a little darker to match. Right? I'm not worried about the sky at all at this stage. If I were, I would maybe just do a big soft brush. I'm picking my brush. I already have brush settings that I like. And then you could make them smaller or bigger by using your keypad. And I'll do something like this and it looks okay for now. So when I do this, it's really about matching these lines in here so they move away so that we have a close match to the background. We're going to add in the other side. I just, again, use the move tool, drag the file over, just close this out so they don't hold up too much memory. Then I pick a place to do this. You saw me picking some lines, architectural lines in the picture. In this, I would do the same, but there's two different things here, right? You have built matter, which is straight lines, and then you have organic matter, which is the water. So we'll use a straight line to sort of right in here to get us through the architecture. We'll line them up, and then I'm going to use the soft brush to blend the water. So I'll tell you this right away. I could spend 10% of the time creating a picture like this and make it look good. The other 90% of the time, maybe I don't even need to do that. I could just keep that bow of the boat out of the picture. So you see the little lamp in the boat right there. We'll just keep that water. So 10% of my time is spent doing this to make it look good. The other 90% of the time is going in and making it seamless pixel by pixel. I do want to give a shout out to my retouch partner. So commercially, right, I've done this for a long time and feel really proficient, but commercially I have a guy, Chris Bodie, who's out of Atlanta, and we've worked together for a decade. So I would do this and I would hand it off to Chris, who will, one, clean it up, and two, make it even better. So a big shout out for him being a honest and super good creative partner for so long.
So helpful.
Yeah. All right. So that looks okay, roughly. I don't know why I'm in a CMYK mode. Let me see. So let me see. I said CMYK, it's not. CMYK is RGB, but you can have a Command Y simulation, which you see up here, CMYK. So that's what I said. I'm going to do Command Y and take that away. Then we're just going to center this so we have all the parts and pieces. I'm going to do something that might not make sense to anyone but me, but it helps me. Pretty much everything I work on, I add a white line around. And it's just a crop line first, but it helps me. It resets my palette for some reason. You can look at a picture and feel it's perfect, and then you look at it an hour later and you go, oh my God, that's green, or that's too red, and oh my, that's too dark. And your eyes adjust to what you're looking at, and it modifies. So that's why I like to have the white around, to have something neutral within the frame.
That's such a good tip.
From here, I would do an overall contrast. So maybe it looks something like this. It's getting close, feels maybe a little, so let me see. I'm just naming the layers as we go so that we can find what we're looking for when we get deep into the layers here. I would add a little bit of warmth to it. So quickly, when I say what gives me warmth within curves is adding red and maybe adding some magenta. And magenta is opposite of green, so I would pull some magenta lever down in the center. What I do to a lot of my pictures, which I love, go down to the blue channel, is a mixture of warm and cool. A lot of my work has a warmer palette, but then a lot of it too has bluer shadow tones, which I love. And that is created by taking the bottom blue lever, and you see all the shadow tones now goes towards the blue. I'm just going to do that by, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 points, something like that maybe. But then we don't want that to affect most of the picture, so we'll take it down to the center line here and maybe add a little blue here. Now we get something that feels warm in the highlights and cool in the shadows, which I love.
Yeah.
It's one of my little tricks. Sorry. Yeah, I could go Command C or there.
Yeah, that's much better.
Sorry about that.
That's okay.
Yeah. So this would be my starting point, right? Then we'll start masking it out for the sky, and that would be the second element. So this is our bottom. We'll start with this frame. It's just a tiny bit here to grab for the sky. So masking, I'm not going to do this in thorough detail. And there's a million ways to mask. There's a million ways to do everything in Photoshop, by the way. So
true.
This is just my way, and it's something that I feel super comfortable with. If you feel there's a way that works better for you, use that way. There's no right or wrong in Photoshop. So if you ask me about masking and why I do it a certain way, it's just because I'm used to it. You don't have to do it this way at all. But just hit Command D here. I use the magic wand, quick selection, all of these kind of computes pixels the same. It's essentially just grabbing a contrast between these layers. So I have mine on continuous, which means it will only grab pictures from this file and not just go into other files. You see, this is the outline of the layer underneath. One big thing with these is that these pixels, we are not having pixelated edges, right? So what I always do when I select, I hold the Control key, and then we pull up the drop-down menu for feather. This also lives up here under select. And I feather pretty much everything that's somewhat sharp, 0.8, that's my go-to. If it's something that's really sharp, it's less. Down here, you see it's falling out of focus, so maybe this is 1 pixel, right? So now we have an automated edge that we have feathered, and then I'm just gonna fill that with black, which is Option Delete. And when you do Option Delete or Command Delete, it will fill in either the foreground or background color that you have right here. So you can fill in colors, or you can fill in, for me, it's black and white. We want to mask this out. We don't want to see it, so you're going to fill it with black, like that. What happens when you feather an edge and you fill it, let me zoom in here so we can see. it helps to fill this edge a couple of times. So there is the edge that we chose. We fill it once. If we fill it again, this feather is going to be a little crisper. So we fill it again. I would say that wasn't maybe quite perfect. We'll disable the layer mask. I would maybe done this a little neater, but for now and for showing how the process is, I think it's okay. What do you say, Anna?
Yeah, I think it's great.
I don't think we need to spend time on masking. It's an art in itself, masking, but
it really is.
Yeah.
It always takes so long.
Yeah. So again, as I say, I could do this in 10% of the time. The other 90% is really made doing my pictures seamless. So what you see me here is clicking a few times. So I click once here and it'll pick white tones. I'll click again and it will pick blue colors. So I just go in and so let me see. I hold down the shift key. You will see I will get a plus sign, which means it will add to the selection I already have. So now I'm just sampling different colors that it will pick on this layer only to help me select the sky, which we are going to replace here in a second. Okay. That's quick enough. Again, control drop-down menu, we feather our edge. You know, it was too much last time, right? We came too far into the picture, so we're going to feather it 0.8. Now this is what's going to happen. We have feathered this edge right here. So if I fill this now, it will leave a residue around the edge. So I'm going to go in and just quickly just make sure that all this is included so that we don't have any ghosting later on in the file. I'm going to pick my layer mask. Okay. Too fast or slow, Anna?
No, this is perfect speed. Yeah. Okay. This is great. Again, Marcia has a quick question, actually something I was wondering about too. Your tools are on the right. Is there a reason for that? Is that something you've always done or just a personal preference? I'm always curious of how people set up their Photoshop workspace.
I'm going to tell you something. And Adobe should listen, please. When they put this palette over here, right? Which maybe makes sense because it's balanced on the screen, this and that. But if you work on a tablet, so let me see, I'm on a Wacom.
Oh yeah.
I would then go back and forth on my Wacom all day long until I realized, why the heck do my palette sit over here? It should be right here on the right side where I operate everything else. This way I move my hand half an inch versus 34 inches all the way across.
Wow.
So it's really just oh my God, my hand and my wrist just feels terrible after a day of retouching. This helps. So it's really so just
interesting.
A practical thing for me.
Yeah.
So this obviously, we could talk about the palettes for a second, but these are the things I use, right? I have my actions, which now is set for JPEGs, which I'll use all the time, just quickly. And then here's my history if I need to go back. So this is really what I use. I use this for all the adjustment layers, right? Which you've seen. We're going to get into some of the others in a minute. Adjustment layers, my history, and this is going to be my layer palette, which eventually will get today 100 layers deep. I don't think we'll do all. We'll go into the file that I already done, my final file, and use some of that. Magic wand, I select. I did the lasso tool to make sure I caught all the edges. We come in, we feather. There's obviously things here and here that is not done right, but we'll choose my layer mask. Again, you guys can Google layer masks, but essentially this window here, this box, will allow me to show the things in white and block out the things in black. So I do this. Now we don't see the sky for this picture, which then makes us ready for the sky.
Yeah.
We could talk about architecture of files too. That is something that's different for everyone as well. So don't mind me, but I'll show you quickly how I do it. But first, the sky image it's shot the same way as I did the other shots, right? So let's say 30 and 15. I'm just expanding the canvas. Put that there. Put that here.
Looks like a lot of people are going to change their setup now after your after your tip there. It's so funny.
Let me see. I went to Namibia, and it's one of my favorite places ever. My gosh, this was such a beautiful place.
Looks beautiful.
So what happens here when you point the camera up and you shoot with a wide lens, you get all these different distortions, right? So take me, again, this would be fine-tuned and done pixel by pixel, right? But for today, so this is as simple as me shifting from a brush, which is brushing black, to an eraser that's erasing. So just erasing and working with the mask till it looks somewhat decent. There's a curse on here, but it doesn't have anything on it. But we'll keep it. I'll put those in a layer folder or a group. We'll call this sky. Okay. And then we'll drag this in here. So there's two ways to do this, right? I could have dragged the sky in first and then made a mask on the sky to fit. But when I build my files, I like to start from the back and layer things forward, so that we start with the file that's visually the furthest back in the picture, and then you layer things on top as you move closer. So what we'll do is take the sky, we move it underneath, and there it is. We have moved it right in here. And then again, we talked about matching light and matching sources, right? Sun, sun, and we line those up. And it's a little bit off, but that's okay.
Yeah.
So what we'll do here is, let me see. This is this file that's showing up. So we need to remove. So this is residue. I call it residue, but let me zoom in here. So when I did this mask, just, there's small little things here. So when I hit, is it the back shift? You will see the mask of this picture, and you see there's a few things here that I missed. And that's why I used the lasso tool on some, but I missed them anyway. So there, I'm going to take this away. This does not belong to any of this, I think, to about here. So now that I selected these, I just hit Option and Delete, which will fill these areas I selected with black. They're showing red now, just because you can hit the back switch and that will show you the mask in red, just to get a visual on what the black part in this box is. Okay.
It's already looking so cool. It's great.
So don't save the sky. Okay, so here we are. Let me see. Questions? So this is how I build my landscapes, really.
Yeah. Yeah, easy peasy. Let's see. So Ferry asked, how do you work with the raw files so that they look like they have the same white balance?
Oh.
Good question.
So let me tell you this. I have never shot a digital picture with a white card. And I never, ever worried about the white balance. So this is what happens. We want things neutral, right? Because that's the sort of the standard. But if you've been through the exercise I showed you, or just look at any picture you like, do you see any picture of yours that is neutral, that is perfectly neutral? I would say in 99.9% of people, nobody has any interest in a neutral image. We respond to feeling, we respond to color, we respond to tone, we respond to things that's tactile. And for us to neutralize this, to make white and black, is of no interest to me. So I get this question quite a bit. And when I travel and I work with assistants that I haven't worked before, they show up with their little color checker and want to do a color check on the digital captures. And I'm like, I mean, if you want to, if it makes you feel better, you can shoot one, but that's not my picture. You know, my picture is driven by light and tone. Imagine this light quality here, right? It's evening. If we do an auto color neutralization of this, the whole feeling of low sunset light has gone away. it will take away the warmth that we're attracted to in the beginning. So
Yes.
I would, it's a terrible answer, but it's the
No,
best
that's it.
answer.
I think that's a great answer, because I think it takes it full circle back to finding your style.
You know, for me, it's completely irrelevant. Now, if you want to match pieces, sure, it might be a helpful tool, but I do it by eye.
Yeah.
So
Love it.
sorry. Yeah. So it's a non-technical way, right? But again, I don't think that should get in your way from for creating. It is, yeah, feeling.
Yeah.
So let me see. I didn't do any color correction to the sky here, but we should maybe. So let me see. I'm going to call this density. And I'm naming these curves layers because in the end, I'm going to have so many of them, it's just going to get confusing.
Yeah.
So we want to warm it up. We go into our red channel, get a little warmth, go into our, I don't know, it might be purple enough, but it's probably purple enough. So let me do one layer right now that I like to use. And this might answer a little bit of the white balance and making pieces fit together. So between curves and a hue saturation layer, the last layer that I use is a color fill layer. So we're going to go to solid color, and we're going to pick an orangey tone, which is some of my favorite. So something like that, maybe in here, it's a little less saturated. Okay, I'm going to put that on top. And then we're going to set this setting here to color. Makes it see-through in a bright yellow. I'm going to take this opacity here down to 5. It doesn't do much, but what it does, it evens out highlights and tones on a subtle level that makes now the connection between the parts and pieces fit a tiny bit better together. And it's my little cheat. I use it on almost every picture that I do. And I choose this color, this warm, right? Because it is warm. But if this was a moody cinematic, more bluish in tone color, I would choose something in the blue realm, right? And this is what this 7% will do to that. So it doesn't look like much when I do it on the warm side, but this is what it does. And it evens things out. And you can see how the water highlights, the buildings, the clouds now feel like a unit.
Yeah.
More so than they did when I just like here. So, I mean, it feels pretty good. And the parts are somewhat close, and you will see the effect if the clouds was way different. So this is my little cheat. Maybe that helps the white balance thing, because this will actually adjust your highlight and the white balance a tiny bit.
Yeah, it's amazing how much that helps. It really blends everything together.
I'll make it a little warmer. Let's go in there. And I have one of these at the top in the final file. So we're going to get to that too. All right. Let's add the guy first, maybe. Let's start with the guy.
We have about 30 minutes left, a little less.
So why don't you give me 10 more minutes on this? We get the pieces in, and then we can do 10 minutes on the actual file so that you can see all the different layers with the fine tuning and this and that.
That sounds perfect.
And let me see, I'm just gonna open this up. So when you open a file in Photoshop, it's a flat background layer. I just double click on it. It becomes layer 0, which will allow me then to hit this button. I'm just gonna do it again, which will give me my mask, which will allow us to quickly mask this out. So this is from the rooftop studio in Los Angeles. We now have 3 elements: the sun matched on the background landscape, the unmovable element. Again, we're doing everything to match this, right? We find a sky to match, and then we set the talent to match. So same tools again, and we're just gonna quickly mask through. So let me see.
Flora asked if you like photo filters. She said they preserve luminosity over color fill. Also, Flora, big fan of your work. So nice to have you here.
I have not. So again, it's so
Photoshop is so
Yeah.
crazy rich. And if you dive into it, I would ask maybe the evangelists, right, who knows every bit of the software. I don't. So I use this thing because it works for me. And I mean, if it preserved the luminosity, maybe then it wouldn't have that effect of merging the layers a tiny bit. So I don't know.
Right. Right.
I would say explore. Photoshop is, and this is the best thing about Photoshop. When you explore, and I find this all the time, when my layers don't connect and the top layer affects the layer underneath, suddenly something happens and it's an accident. And I go, oh my God, that's so cool.
Exactly.
So these accidents that is within exploring in Photoshop often takes my work to somewhere better. So, so no is the answer. I don't use it. And yeah, I would say try it.
Yeah.
So let me see. So a tolerance over here is quite effective, right? Because we have a white background and there's not a lot of difference between the sample colors in the dress and the background. So then let's try at 11, which makes the sample group a little neater. See, now it's masking around the dress. So again, you see that I'm not sure if this is too small for you to see, but I use the magic wand. I hold down the shift key, which gives me a plus. I think you can hold down option gives you a minus if you want to subtract, but for now I'm holding down the plus so that I keep adding to my original selection. Okay, and I just click, click, click all day long to get through this. See.
It's always so
when
cool.
I have a more refined sample of 11 color tones, it goes slower, but it's a little bit more accurate. So where am I at here?
I always love seeing everyone's process for how they cut things out and layer masking and color toning. And as you said early on, you know, and what you kind of just mentioned, there's a million different ways to do things in Photoshop. And that's the true beauty of seeing people's workflows.
Yeah. Anyway, I feel this is a sloppy way to do it. It's not sloppy. In the end, it will be perfect. It's just easy. You could draw all the way around it. You could do a lot of things, but anyway, so here I am. I've done a lot of those. I do a feather. Let's keep it at 0.8, which is my go-to. I then use the lasso tool. Again, I hold down shift because that will allow me to add to this. And I would just go, see if I lower this thing here a little bit. So now I'm just essentially just cleaning up all the pixels that the magic wand did not catch. Okay. I still have not made this mask, by the way. I'm still making just selections by holding down the shift key to keep adding to it. So, okay, roughly.
Yeah.
So often for clients, I do this on set and I layer pieces in and it looks good. And then I tell them, well, you can have your file in 2 weeks when the retouch is done. And they go, what? You just did it in 2 minutes. What do you mean 2 weeks? Yeah, but no, obviously this, if you go in, again, 90% of the time is really just making it pixel perfect.
Right.
So you see all this stuff now, right? It looks good from afar. It looks terrible when you go close up. And it matters to make all this stuff perfect. I'm not going to do that now, though. We're going to jump into the other file. I'm going to name this for talent. And we're going to drop this in.
Wow. It's amazing how much when you really plan things out ahead of time and like plan the lighting and already kind of know your composition, how just adding that in, it kind of already matches even without the color grading. And it's an interesting look into the process.
Oh, so you nailed it, Anna. That's the thing, right? If you want to do seamless composites, you have to start with that unmovable element.
Yeah.
And if you shoot then if you shoot it with the same perspective and the same lens, the same light as that first part you want to work with, all the pieces should fall perfectly together like it just did.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I'm probably not going to line it up quite perfect, but so I'm going to just quickly, this makes it look like it's floating, right? So when you look at a composite, you go, just ask yourself, what's wrong? What does it feel? Why does it feel like it's floating? And sometimes it's just as simple as a shadow. For me now, it's because it's not grounded in the water. So I'm just going to quickly, let me zoom in. I'm making the window too small again. I would usually not do it this way. I would usually take the whole thing and make a mask. But now, just to be quick, copy and paste. Now we have another layer of this post. I'm going to move it down like that, roughly. Let me give it a layer mask. All right, something like that. I'll show you on the other file. This sits lower. It should probably be a little darker if I want to create a curve. So I hold down the Option key and I hover between the layers. That will allow me to attach these to each other. So this density only affects the bottom part. Make it a little darker because it's lower, less light underneath the dock there. And now I feel like we grounded it somewhat. And that, Anna, is the process.
Wow. So cool. So Jonathan had a question for you, wondering if you ever use stock photos or are you 100% shooting all your own images?
No, I use stock photos.
Oh, okay.
So, well, I say that as if it's a given, but no, I don't really use stock photos because I like to make my own pictures. But as a practice, I think it's great for people to use stock photos. I don't see, as long as you infuse your own aesthetic into it, you could use parts and pieces from others. Where cool. I do use stock pictures is, let's say they wanted a swan, right? One of my pictures was a swan early on.
Yeah.
We did some research about going to a swan sanctuary and what the swans could do and could not do. And in the end, we were just, let's just buy a stock image from the swan. And then we, massage the things around it to fit. So in those cases, yes. Oh, I didn't add the boat. Should we do it? You guys get the gist of it, right?
Yeah, let's add them both.
Should we add the boat? Select. So this one is a little tricky in that it doesn't necessarily looks like the same light, but the light quality coming from the back versus the sun here coming from the back will allow us to match them in. If this was front lit by this fog, would not be so good, right? So even if the light quality or the light source is a little different, at least the direction is there, the camera height is there, and did some, this feels really green and moody because of that, we could drop it in. It should now fall somewhat into place perspective-wise, and then this will allow me to maybe show you how we could use color to fine-tune that and make it fit better. So let's call this for boat. First thing I do to every layer pretty much is to add my mask, because that need to be there no matter what. I would just quickly do just the top here. So again, magic wand, use my lasso tool, just do this on top here. I don't want to mask the water quite yet, because again, we talked about the architecture, right? I use harder lines with water and people and hair and all that stuff is more organic. So we use softer. So I'll use a brush on that to mask it out. But just to get our bearings right. Oh, I didn't feather it. So hold down the control key, get my menu, feather. If I go too fast, you can also go up here, select and modify and feather too. You'll find it there as well. And then we fill that space, option delete for black, which is option delete fills in this color, and there we are. So let me just make it a bit smaller.
Yeah,
So when
this
you
is
look at
looking
this,
really
you can
good.
tell that this is too flat and it's a little bit too cyanish maybe. Again, you can explore the colors on Adobe Color. Do you know, Anna, is it Adobe Color? Adobe.color.com, I think.
I'm not actually sure. I'm not sure if
Just
Cody
Google
Bear
Adobe
knows.
Color and you get to the site that they made, which is just so fun. So again, we do our adjustment layer, we pull down to curves. I would start with some red tone in it. Okay, so now it affected everything. And this is one of these accidents we talked about, right? When you do something for one layer and it affects all of them. For now, hover between the two layers, add my option key. It's interesting because I've been doing this for so long. I don't look down on my keyboard, I just do it. But now that I explain it, I have to look, is it the command or option or control key? Oh yeah, it's that one. So let me see. So we added some warmth. So now what I see is that the warmth feels good on the boat to me, but now it's almost too warm in the water. So maybe we'll separate the water and the boat, but overall, I always start with something that fits the overall aesthetic. Back to a little bit less red. Let's call this color. Boat. There. A little contrast. So what happens here when you have a curve, the bottom of the curve is the blacks or the darker tones of the picture. You have the mid-tones in here and you have the highlights here. So when I create this S shape to the curve, I'm pulling down the blacks and I'm pulling up on the highlights. And that way you create more contrast. So instead of sliding a lever that says contrast, you know, in any software really, that is just computing what should go brighter and what should go darker. Here I can go darker and then I can go as bright in the highlight as I want, right? And I can even just push up the midtones a bit. So this gives you a lot more liberty to set your own flavor to it rather than having the computer compute what contrast should look like for you. So that's our contrast. Feels a little muddy in here, but we added some red. We'll take some green out by adding some magenta. So I pulled down on this lever to give it more darkness. Now I think the picture is maybe overall too dark, but I don't want to change the contrast. So then I could just push this up a little bit and push this up a little bit, which essentially is moving the curve upwards, which is making it brighter. Then I can come in with a brush and just start softening this water. The light quality and the contrast you can really see in the water, right? So what I would do probably here is just use the shadow of the water and then just use the rest of the water from the original picture. That'll probably help us find and blend this element a little easier. I hit 1, that will give me a 10%, or I hit 11, I hit once, twice. So if you use the keys up on your keyboard, it will change the opacity up here, right, on your brush. So I use this all the time. So if you see now there's an opacity here. It's a soft brush. 10% was too little. I hit 3, it'll give me a 30% opacity. And there roughly is the bow. Okay. I think that's it. So instead of me spending we have 10 more minutes, Anna. Instead of me spending more time massaging this to perfection, I thought I would open the actual final Photoshop file and we could walk through the layers and see how things got changed from here.
That would be great. Yeah, let's take a look.
It's almost like a cooking show, right? Now we're gonna put this in the oven and we're gonna open it up real quick. Save this as working. So, you know, you should start, if you're starting out, you should start with the naming convention for your server or storage. Adobe Live Behance will tell me what this is. I usually would go an underscore for the image caption number, and VIP is for me work in progress. And as I save these different versions, this will be work in progress 1. We go to Photoshop and we save it in the same folder. And then here's my, let me just close this out. So we,
very important to have a good naming system.
yeah. So I mean, we could talk about it briefly, but Y&R was the advertising agency, Young and Rubicam. Crystal was the client. Menace was the place we shot day one, and then the caption number. That's my naming convention. Some people choose to put dates in there. Kind of drives me crazy because the dates are embedded in the file anyway. You can search on the dates through the metadata. So,
right.
Okay, so this is the picture.
Wow,
Should I open up the one we did to see how different they are?
Yeah, let's do it. That'd be really interesting. And then let's make your final image a little bigger once we get into it so we can really take a look.
All right.
Pretty close.
Close enough. All right.
Yeah.
This is obviously better.
Yeah. It always is when you look at the final, but it's interesting to see the difference in color too. Yeah.
Yeah, I cooled the sky down a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's way too warm. The small details. So we softened the shadows. They felt too harsh here, right, compared to the other stuff. There was a shadow from a board on this bag that we took away. These small little details really help it sit in there a little bit better.
Right.
So let's just close out on that. Make this bigger. So,
and can you zoom in on where you had the pole touching down into the water? I just wanted to see. That was interesting how you did that in the other composite.
So I did that because I knew it, because we had this issue at the same time, right? That this felt floating.
Right.
So we extended the post down, and then we added a reflection, which is liquefy in Photoshop to make this grounded to the water level.
Oh, wow.
Should we go through it layer by layer? Or
yeah, let's see what we can squeeze in. We don't have too much time left, just about like 6 more minutes, but
so I'm gonna just take these away for now. The sky we went through, right? The landscape. These are the pieces that I used. I used 4 pieces here. I think one was just ended up being just some extra water. Yeah, just this corner right there with water. So we essentially built this. Then there's a clone layer here. You see all these patches of paint and stuff that's just distracting. Those got taken out. I call this edges burn in, but you could see that it's still just a contrast or a curves layer. This is just taking down highlights, pulling all the way down on the highlight lever. Small little details that help match light, right? Because it was a little harder on this dock than it was here in the original. So let me just take these away again. So that's the landscape and adjustments. There's the post reflection that I just showed you down here that helps us ground the post into the water and elevate the dock. There's the dock. The dock has the dock posts in it, which we did separate. It has a new dock, which ended up putting in with a softer shadow. It has the talent shadow that we separated out. The reason for me separating that talent shadow, to be honest, was that our shadow went a little bit too much this way. I wanted it to, I missed it by a tiny bit on the direction. So we moved that a tiny bit, and then there's the talent. And I could open this up so you could start seeing the detail. This is, let me see, I'm gonna move this. There, my scroll bar disappeared here. You start seeing all the different layers that goes into massaging the picture.
Yeah, wow, look at that. Oh my God.
And then there's the boat at the end. And I added a hat to the boat driver. So this is what the file looks like. in the end.
Wow.
There's no secrets in here, but for the things I did. But you see a hue saturation layer, that is to tone down the posts. It's all about matching that original background layer that we talked about. So if the color is a little too vibrant compared to the background, hue saturation to tone that down.
Yeah.
You see the sun streaks, you see light in the foot. All these things are, again, curves that is used in certain areas. Some people use dodge and burn. I do the same effect through using curves in the layers. So
amazing work, Erik. And I hate to cut you off because this is so interesting, but we are completely out of time. So I just want to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Be sure to tune in tomorrow at 9:30 Pacific for day 2 with Erik. Erik, thank you so much. This was very insightful, very inspiring. And I will see you tomorrow. Come back and join us tomorrow, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, for joining in.
Yes. Bye, everyone.
Cheers.